All right, you want to have an expansion draft? You need rules. So here they are. Seattle must choose one player from each team except the Vegas Golden Knights, who are exempt. 20 picks must be under contract in the 21-22 season. You have to have at least 14 forwards, 9 defensemen, 3 goaltenders. The other 4, wild cards. You want to pick 4 more goalies? Be our guest. Do whatever you want with those other 4 picks. So, Lutz, we're going to take a crack at our own expansion draft lists. We're going to start with the forwards, and you are going to lead us off.
Okay, fantastic. Let's take a look. Keep in mind, teams are literally running 100 different mock drafts. Okay, does that mean you can go 100 different ways? No, but you can put a twist 100 different ways on 4 or 5 strategies. Mine right here, quite frankly, you're going to see if you take a look at my forwards, I went with 16 out of the required 14. Now, am I going to hold on to all these guys? Maybe, maybe not. I can't have 16 really NHL players on my roster at forward. At least I can't keep them, protect them all, so I'm going to lose some of them. And some of that thought went into this. But when I add it all up, my strengths are, there's some pretty good wingers in there. My weaknesses are down the middle. I have a plan for that. But that doesn't necessarily show up in this.
Yeah.
Okay, we could talk about that a little bit more as we get deeper into the show. But for instance, you hear a name like Ryan Johansson. You don't have to pick him in the expansion draft at $8 million. You know that Nashville, by virtue of leaving him unprotected, has signaled to the world that we would move this guy.
Yeah.
So you can go back in and ask them and say, you know what? I don't like it at $8 million. I know how many years are left, but I don't like it at 8. How about if you just take back a little bit, say 30%, 20%, get it down to $6 million, and you've got a real manageable asset. That's where the battle has been going on. That's the battleground that's getting beaten up right now by everybody that's not named Seattle, according to the sources I've talked to.
All right, let me ask you about Alex Killorn, because the Tampa Bay Lightning situation is fascinating. On their protected list, they wanted to protect the 4 defensemen, so they only could protect 4 forwards. 8 and 1 they went in their protection list. You take Killorn. What's your thinking there?
Well, first off, Tampa has a lot of players exposed, but at the end of the day, why take silver when you can pick gold? Okay. Alex Killorn, to me, is gold. Now, a lot of people have said, well, there's not that many centers available, and that is true. Why not take Yanni Gourde? Well, because I think Alex Killorn has more value than Gourde, and I think he has more value than Palat. His cap hit is a little bit less. He's coming off an absolute high in his career in terms of the way he performed, even though he wasn't in the final couple of games. Yeah. But the way he performed in the playoffs, the season he's had, there's so many teams that are hot for this guy right now. He's a guaranteed first and then some back.
Oh, okay.
So what about Gourde, though? What about Palat? Nothing to stop you from going back to Tampa after the expansion draft and competing for those guys. Seattle is on an island in terms of the competition that they're going to come up against to get players like that. So you could go back in if you like to Yanni Gourde. He's got quite a bit of term left. He's making $5+ million. But if you really wanted him because you don't have the strength down the middle, go back in and make a deal. You're going to find that you might get something in order to take him because Tampa's in such a tough position salary cap-wise. They still have Tyler Johnson on the books.
Exactly.
You might go back in and pick that up. So there's a lot of things that are going to go on. Don't make your final decisions just by the expansion list of the players that you see Seattle.
I think we learned that with Vegas, right? Because what they picked and what they ended up with were a lot different. And so I think you make great points there. The Tampa thing is terrific. We could talk about that for a while. I'll give you my list. And I did take Yanni Gourde on my list. I just think you know exactly what he is. He's a 2 or a 3 center, and a really good team, he's a 3. He can slide up and play a 2. You got him on term. He's one of those guys, the fans are going to love him. He's going to be an energy guy for you, so I took him. You go down the list there. I went for some speed where I could get it, a Paul Byron. I decided to take him because I think he can skate. He's going to be able to skate for a while. He could be part of your group. You know, when you think about Brandon Tanev, that's another guy under contract for a while, but he's a good player that can help you now, and he has value. Other teams might want him down the road. Somebody might say, why did you take Uncle Leo? He's got a year left at $3 million. Well, the reason that I would take Uncle Leo is I would go back to Uncle Lou, and I would say, hey, I did you a favor, or I'm going to do you a favor. I'll take Leo Komarov at $3 million. He's got 1 more year left. He can play on my fourth line. He's a great pro. Now you're going to do me a favor, and you're going to give me a player, another player with him. Maybe it's Michael Del Cole. Maybe it's somebody else you like in the Islanders system. Maybe it's a pick if they have any left. They traded them all to Arizona, it seemed like, to unload Andrew Ladd. So I think Lou really wants the cap space right now. I think he's got big plans going into a new building. I would be willing to take on Komarov at that number, as long as I get something else.
And just for clarity, you are eligible or allowed to do that. It's not a violation of the CBA. You can have an agreement already in your back pocket. And most likely, you would have already had this conversation.
That's right. Yeah.
So when you see a pick like that, fans, right away you're going to know, bang, there's something going on here. There's something more coming my way. It's just smart business. I like that pick. I took Josh Bailey myself.
Who's a really good player.
He's definitely a top 6 forward in this league. He's proven that. And it's going to be helpful for the Islanders. It's probably one of the few teams where it wasn't more of an assault against them. The teams that are really up against it kind of stayed away from their players strategically, because I know I'm going to go back and have conversations with them, and I know they don't have a lot of options. So I'd feel like I'm going to get a little bit more return even after the draft. Yours would be predetermined. Smart business.
Yeah. All right. Let's get to the defensemen now, because Vegas, when they did this, they drafted a lot of defensemen. I think both you and I did the same thing because they're valuable. Give me your list.
They're fungible, as we like to say. They're easily movable. And as you see right here, Mark Giordano, the cap hit is high. The game certainly slowed, but you need a captain. You need somebody to set this franchise off in the right direction. That is Mark Giordano. For me, I didn't make a lot of exceptions where I took a guy that was so high priced, but he was one of them because of the character, because of how he came into this league, because of what he's been able to do for the Calgary Flames. I still feel with 1 year remaining on that contract, it's a meaningful move. Carson Soucy, love him in Minnesota. And almost all of these guys, when you break it down, I have 5 potential guys that could be top 4D. Do I have 1 or 2s or even 3s? Not really. But that's what you're going to get in the expansion draft. And we've seen it before. You can do really, really well with that. You can build a D, in my opinion, that's better than at least 10 to 12 teams in this league right off the bat. Just by virtue of how this expansion draft is set up.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of good defensemen out there on these lists. I think you can do. I completely agree with you that there are a number of good defenders out there. Let's take a look at my list and what I went with. And I did take Mark Giordano off the top again. He's somebody who's got 1 year left. He's a quality person. He's been the captain of the Calgary Flames. If he wants to leave and go somewhere else, maybe you move him, you get something back. If not, you keep him and you have him maybe to the deadline. Maybe he's a big player for your team. You make the playoffs, and he's a great acquisition. I took Shane Gostisbehere as well, 4.8 over the next 2 years. He's played for that coach before. He's had success with that coach before. And I think with Shane Gostisbehere, you got to understand what he is and what he isn't. He's a guy that can shoot the puck. He's a guy that can help you on the power play. He's a guy that's an offensive-minded defenseman. Is he a great defender? No. But I'm not going to beat him up for that, because there's a lot of players, lots, that are like that in the league, that are good at one thing. Take advantage of what he's good at. Get him with a defenseman that can help him and offset that. The rest of the list there, I had a hard time. I mentioned it to Mike Kelly. Carson Soucy or Kraken from Minnesota. I talked to Bruce Boudreau, who had Soucy. He's a 6'5" defenseman. Those guys are hard to find. I ended up taking Soucy and putting him in my group as well. And I like that group of defensemen. Jake Bean, I think, to me, is one of those guys that Ronnie Francis drafted Jake Bean with the Carolina Hurricanes. He was a first-round pick. I think he's going to take him. He also was part of the group that took Hayden Fleury. Hayden Fleury is now a Duck. He's on the list. I could see him go in that direction, too. So for me, I think I've put together a good group of defensemen, and the guys that I can't keep, maybe a Zadorov, who's a restricted free agent. I'd love to sign him. Maybe I can move him. So these are the guys that I went with.
Very fungible. Hayden Fleury, of course, 7th overall. Jake Bean, 13th overall. Carson Soucy, though, to me, not just 6'5", a guy that was literally blocked out from more minutes. Not that he couldn't earn them. He was just blocked by that fabulous 4 that Minnesota used to have before they moved Ryan Suter out. So I think he's a guy that's going to explode. I think he has the potential to literally be a top 3 defenseman. So I think you're going to see a big jump up in his career, really valuable guy for them.
Yeah, that's where knowing the players is so valuable for the Kraken here. With all this work, they have to know him. Like I have a guy on my list, Nico Mikkola in St. Louis. Not many fans would really know who he is.
Yeah.
Why didn't you go with Vince Dunn? Well, Mikkola is a big guy. He's about 6'4", and I think there's a lot of upside there. We were talking off camera about him. He's someone that could develop into a player for you.
Yeah, clearly. He had some ups and downs, but he's a guy that's a work in progress, and the ceiling is pretty high with him. He definitely will be an NHL player. Will he be a top 4D or not? I think you're going to see Seattle make a lot of bets on guys. And that could be just some of the D that we were talking about earlier. I also had Gauthier on my list. He was drafted by Carolina.
Yep, that's right.
I think Ron Francis, I think he'll be very open-minded to giving guys that he knows well, maybe selected before when he was general manager of Carolina, more opportunity, and they're certainly going to get that in Seattle.
Yeah, he knows those players from having gone through the draft with those guys. We will see what he decides to do, but those are the forwards, those are the defense. The men in pads, the goaltenders. You need good goaltending. Ooh. Seattle will have a choice of many high-end goaltenders. You see the list there. Carey Price at the very top. Matt Murray, Jonathan Quick, Ben Bishop, Braden Holtby. I mean, Tuukka Rask at the bottom there. He's having the surgery, but available as well. Some good younger ones, some good older ones, lots. Let's talk about the goaltenders that we were going to add for our respective teams, and I will start with you. How many did you take, and who did you take?
I took 4 goaltenders, and, you know, you can go either way, but keep in mind, at the end of the day, if you're not going to move some around, you're probably going to lose them when waiver wire hits, when you have to submit your final roster. So you got to keep that in mind, otherwise you get carried away because there's a lot of good names. Casey DeSmith locked into a 1-year deal. I didn't really like what I saw in Pittsburgh. I feel like Pittsburgh's got some real cap issues. At the end of the day, I believe that Brandon Tanev was a guy of interest, but I wasn't going to give it to him. I might make a phone call.
You're going to make him work for it.
Yes, a lot of term left on that deal.
Okay.
Expensive, but a really good player. Alex Stalock, he's a backup for you, potentially. Could be in the minors. You just don't know how that shakes out. Vitek Vanacek. This guy could be a potential starter, as could Chris Driedger. That's the real gold in my picks there, in my opinion. And then I know that in the UFA market, there's a lot of names out there, so I didn't go crazy on the goaltenders. If there was somebody I really wanted, I feel like I could take them. Braden Holtby, on the other hand, if I wanted to somehow get involved with a deal for him, I feel like I would be the third team in it. I might be the team retaining a little salary, and that's kind of built into my entire mock draft, the flexibility to be able to do something like that.
All right, let me ask you about Driedger, because his name is out there. It looks like Seattle is going to sign him, and he's going to be part of their group. At least that's what's been reported. We will find out, obviously, tomorrow night. Give me your thoughts on Driedger as far as a goalie and what he brings to the table.
Well, he's big. He's got great athleticism. He's a guy also that has some familiarity with the state of Washington, having started his career in the Western Hockey League with Tri-City. He knows that area well. He's made it known, at least in the rumor mill, that he's not opposed to playing there. I do believe he will get a 3- or 4-year contract, most likely 4 years. I do think he'll get $3.5 million, which is not quite a starter in today's world, but it's not a backup either.
Yeah.
He's kind of sawing the whole thing off a little bit, but I think that would be a great solution for him at this stage. At 27 years old, he really broke through last couple of years. This would be an excellent stepping stone for him. He's got a lot of runway left as a goaltender, but the size is what really stands out for me. He's going to be terrific. He will be a starter, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think he's the best value of all the goalies that are out there right now. Let me give you my list of goaltenders, and Driedger is on it as well. And I did take Vanacek of the Washington Capitals. I could see Driedger and Vanacek being a nice duo. And then I did take Braden Holtby, and I see your point, and it's really wise that you could get in there a different way. I had a specific plan, though, for Braden Holtby, is that I'm going to take Braden Holtby, and then I've probably already had these conversations with the Flyers and the Devils in particular, and really the Flyers, because they've got Carter Hart there in Philly, and he is the guy moving forward. Well, Braden Holtby, another Western Canadian guy that had similar kind of upbringing through the WHL, and I could see a real nice duo there for a year to help Carter Hart get to that next level. So I take Holtby. I immediately call Philadelphia. I try to work out something. Maybe I get another player. I've already taken Gostisbehere.
Sure.
Maybe I can take Robert Hogg, too, if I like him on defense, and flip him somewhere or someone else. But that will be the plan. If Philly says, no, we're not that interested, okay. I pick up the phone. I call the New Jersey Devils. Because remember, last year, they signed Corey Crawford as that veteran guy to be behind Mackenzie Blackwood. That didn't work out due to the injury issues. They would be interested. I guess what I'm saying is, I think I have a lot of places I could go with Braden Holtby. So that's the reason I went in that direction.
100%. We don't have time to go through all the machinations.
There's a lot. There's a lot.
It literally is endless. And again, that's why when you hear these teams doing so many mock drafts, you go, huh? How many mock drafts do you have to do? Why can't you just do 3 or 4? That should do it. No. Think in terms of 100.
Yeah.
That's how many different machinations there are. That's how many different directions you can go. And it all starts with, how do you want to end up in your first year? Are you trying to win? Are you trying to be competitive? Are you building for the long term? Are you just trying to accumulate assets? So many different directions. So exciting for Ron Francis and the Seattle Kraken and their fan base. You know it's going to be exceptional out there. They've already blown the lights out on everything they can, non-hockey related each. Yeah. Now they're going to get a chance to do that with hockey operations. That's terrific.
We look at the notable defensemen available. Dano, as we look forward to the expansion draft, the Seattle Kraken have some big names to look at. Right off the top, you, of course, are Mr. Devil. PK Subban played for the New Jersey Devils at one point, 2012-13. He's a Norris Trophy winner. As you look up and down those names, what comes to mind?
Veteran guys that how much do they have left in the tank? And obviously, some of those guys going through injury. Eric Johnson did not play the entire season. I really like him. He would be a great addition for the Seattle Kraken. How healthy is he? We know Shea Weber, for all intents and purposes, may not play this season as well. So there's going to be interesting choices for the Seattle Kraken. But if I'm general manager Ron Francis, I certainly would like a veteran or two on the back end to mix in with some puck-moving, skating type transition defensemen that are 24, 25, 26 along the way if you're going to be competitive early in your first season coming to the National Hockey League. But I don't know what direction you go. I mean, Giordano, 1 year remaining on his contract, been a captain in this league for a long time for the Calgary Flames, only a few years removed from being a Norris Trophy winner.
True.
Would he be an interesting option just for that leadership?
And high character.
High character.
Yes.
Has another year of good hockey in him for sure, a year or two, whatever that may be, although he's got 1 year left in his contract. So that might be an interesting option, I would think, for the Seattle Kraken. A guy that can really help nurture some of these younger defensemen along that we would expect them to have going into this year. So it's going to be very interesting, but they're not going to take 3, 4, 35, 36-year-old defensemen that are questionable from a health standpoint. Giordano would be an interesting one to me.
We talked about high character. A few years ago, he won a Muhammad Ali Citizenship Award. Just think about that for a second. All that Muhammad Ali did for the world when he was no longer a fighter. Gio has tremendous character. Now, there was a name you said earlier when we were talking about all of this that's going on, Jake Bean. Why?
Well, Jake Bean's a young defenseman drafted high. Obviously, the Carolina Hurricanes feel that maybe he hasn't developed as quickly as they would have liked, but he's on the unprotected list, and they elected to protect Brady Shea, who I thought, if available, would be an interesting option for the Seattle Kraken because of his skating ability and good in transition and a big body. So we will see if Seattle thinks Jake Bean needs more time. He needs an opportunity in the National Hockey League to play regularly, and can he be that guy that was highly touted when he was in his draft year?
It's a nice compliment that he's on your radar.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, he's got tools. We've got a lot of tools. What do we always talk about young defensemen? Some mature earlier than others, but it takes upwards of 300 games to become a solid NHL defenseman for the most part. That's the number we usually use, and he has not played nearly that amount of games. But obviously, Carolina put him on that list for a reason. They have their opinion, but it's going to be interesting to see because he's got ability. He can skate, he can move the puck, and a pretty smart hockey player. Just hasn't had the opportunity because in Carolina's defense, they've been so deep on the back end, maybe the best defense core in the National Hockey League for the last couple of seasons, or near the top. And Bean has not really gotten his chance to play. So I would expect he would love to be taken by the Seattle Kraken, because that would mean he's going to get a good opportunity.
This is going to be the first time in 6 years that I disagree with Dano. I'm going to say instead of 300 games, that it took Cale Makar 300 seconds.
Yeah, well,
he's the exception.
There's the exception to the rule. And we're seeing young defensemen come in and have an impact right away.
True.
A lot of the time, though, it's that second season where maybe they have a dip.
Valid.
All of a sudden. But Cale Makar, he's the real deal.
He's
a superstar
special.
already.
My goodness. What do you make of all this? Because this is, compared to what we experienced a few years back with the Vegas Golden Knights, there wasn't a day like this where it was so explosive. What's your biggest takeaway so far?
Some of the players left unprotected, and possibly there's a friendly understanding. You mentioned Josh Bailey with Dave. He's a guy that I would think, you mentioned the numbers and how well he's performed in the playoffs. He's been a fixture for the New York Islanders, a leader. You'd think Seattle would be interested in him, so I'm not sure if, in fact, they think maybe they're going to take Jordan Eberle instead, or another option. But if I'm the Islanders, I don't want to lose Josh Bailey.
Certainly.
He's been such a solid performer for them for a long time. And the Islanders went to Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals, or the one
semis,
game away
sure.
Semifinals,
And
shall I
6
say,
last year.
With everything a little different this year.
Yeah.
With the realignment of the divisions, and they lost 1-0 in Game 7, and he's a big part of that club. So maybe he's one name. I'm a little surprised. Carey Price, you're surprised about, obviously. One of the best goaltenders in the game, has a big contract, big deal. Seattle has to get to the floor, a minimum for sure, the cap minimum. So it's going to be very interesting what Ron Francis decides on how many veteran guys he wants. He can afford to have a few bigger contracts. We know Carey Price waived his no movement, but maybe Montreal knows that they're not going to take Carey Price, and that allows them to protect Jake Allen along the way. There's just so many things to dissect here. What identity does Ron Francis want to have? Does he want to come out of the gate and be competitive? I'm sure they do, and there's a lot of real good players to choose from. Some top teams. Yanni Gourde, what a nice piece that would be as well for for the Seattle Kraken, and that whole entire line who was so valuable for the Tampa Bay Lightning. Blake Coleman, unrestricted free agent. We know Barclay Goodrow traded to the New York Rangers, still looking for a contract. And also Yanni Gourde. That line was so important for them. Well, looks like that line might not be a part of the Tampa Bay Lightning. In fact, none of them will be part of the Tampa Bay Lightning as we see it now. So many things here, and I'm curious to see what Ron Francis does. It's going to be a lot of fun for sure. He has so many options. Does he want speed? Does he want size? Does he want balance? Does he want a combination? That's how I would build the team. A little balance, some veteran presence as well, but you want character. You want guys that can help some of the young guys along as well. Their first draft for them. So much going on here. It's going to be real interesting to see. And we're still going to be going when they pick certain players.
Oh, absolutely.
Leaving another guy left where we go, oh, it would have been better suited to take that guy possibly.
Possibilities are endless.